Godzilla vs. Kong, the movie that saved Hollywood and got you out of the house, or at least some of you. And I feel that everyone's rooting for this film, and the fact that the film's only medium has created this weird dynamic where nobody really wants to talk about the movie. It's weird. Like, everyone's like, it's great. Let's just walk away, and we've all agreed on that. And, I can play that game up front, but this is a spoiler review, and the whole point is to do a deep dive on the story, and that's the weakest part of Godzilla vs. Kong. We're going to have some fun. I'm not ripping the movie apart by any means, but I have some funny things to point out. And I think anyone would recognize the flaws in this film, even if they did love it. I'm very curious to hear about your movie-going experiences now that you've seen it. Where did you see it? Did you go to the theater? What size screen did you see it at? Did you have a big crowd? Did you watch it at home? And how did that affect how you felt about the film? I think a lot of people, again, are going to give this movie a pass, not just from within the industry because it's getting people to go to the movies, but also even moviegoers who are like, you know what, I was just so happy to go and have a good time. That makes the movie special to me. And I totally get that. Godzilla vs. Kong is really benefiting from its positioning. They hadn't kept pushing Black Widow back. It could have been that movie. But I think that, I don't know, Marvel movies have a lot of global appeal too, but Godzilla vs. Kong really has global appeal. I would even argue it's more popular abroad than it is here. And I'm very curious to see how people react to it, because you're going to have people who go in the United States and in the West who watch this movie on the big screen, but you're going to have a lot of people who watch it at home like I did, and they're going to have access to the internet. And I think they might be tweeting, a mix of things like I'm about to go over. Let's just say that. All right, so anyway, yes, hello and welcome to my spoiler review for Godzilla vs. Kong, a movie that about, I'd say, a third of the planet has already seen. So that's also weird, to be kind of like, usually when we discuss movies, they're just coming out. We have the anticipation element. But I think in some ways it feels like Godzilla vs. Kong has already arrived. And I have to say, when I watched the movie, my biggest takeaway was that I felt massively cheated that they didn't shake hands at the end of the movie. And I'm not even trying to make fun of the movie. I honestly wanted them to shake hands. I mean, Godzilla and Kong's interactions were so comical and over the top and made so humanoid that I felt they, and quite frankly I, needed that kind of closure. It's like when you want someone to have a kiss at the end of the movie. I was like, now shake hands. Now, I mentioned this, right at the end, right when they're parting ways before Godzilla goes into the ocean to be off by himself again. They're both so alone. We'll talk about that. But I was like, shake hands. Now, a friend of mine said Godzilla can't shake hands. He doesn't have any opposable thumbs. So I was like, okay, then I would accept a fist bump. I don't think they were at a hug. They weren't at a hug, for sure. I don't think they'll ever be at a hug after what Godzilla did to Kong, which we'll also discuss. But I think a fist bump would have worked. Now, my friend also pointed out to me that technically, because I was like, nobody won. And my friend was like, well, technically Godzilla won because Kong would have died if the humans hadn't jump-started his heart. And I was like, okay, I guess that's true. And by the way, the more I thought about it, I think, Kong wouldn't have won in the ocean if the humans hadn't helped Kong there either. So Kong got a lot of assists. However, I didn't see any rules of engagement. So it helps to have friends, it's just, if Kong has, along with his opposable thumbs, he's like, I got opposable thumbs and friends. In your face, Godzilla. Maybe that's why Godzilla hated him so much. I know a lot of you were like, it's just alpha animals, Grace, but they assigned such human qualities to both Godzilla and Kong that I wanted them to have human motivations. You can't have them act very humanoid and be clearly thinking and then get me to go along with it. They're just, it's in their DNA to fight each other. Then why weren't they fighting before? I guess they kind of are, I don't know. This movie maybe there should have been a series because it had a lot of explaining to do. Now, also, let's talk about Godzilla disrespecting Kong. When Godzilla ground his foot into Kong's chest, looking him right in the eyes while he did it, it was a little like, I was a little kinky too. I was like, this is just all kinds of bad. I thought that was a bit much. I was like, if I were Kong, I would just never get over that. I'd be like, this is just it scarred me physically. Like you could see him carving into Kong's chest. But I'd be like, I'm emotionally scarred too. It was real bad. And I think it made it really hard to be Team Godzilla because Not only did he kill a bunch of humans, but he just seemed like a really mean guy to me. All right, so anyway, although they did team up after that to fight Mechagodzilla, which I always thought was absolutely hilarious. I was like, wouldn't it be funny if they teamed up? And then they did team up. And they teamed up again in a very human way, where Godzilla was on the ropes and he sees Kong coming up behind Mechagodzilla, and he's like, just like in a movie with humans, where he's like, oh, I'm spent, I'm so at the end of my rope, but I'm gonna charge up that axe with my atomic breath, and then so it's gonna assist Kong to be able to take Mechagodzilla apart. Although, of course, the death blow was when he ripped his head off and his spine included. I gotta say, Kong was pretty vicious too. We'll talk about what happened in Hollow Earth. We'll talk about it, because it's seared in my brain forever. But so that was funny when they teamed up that way and he super powered up the axe. I mean, that was just, again, it was very human. I've never seen alpha animals fight each other and then decide to team up later and like with tools and stuff. I mean, so, pick one. You can't be alpha animals and humanoid. You got to go either way. Like either they're just like big dumb animals, no offense, PETA, or they've evolved to be human-esque, and then they need motivation. Now, speaking of Mechagodzilla, I had a lot of problems with Mechagodzilla. Now, the first is that I don't have no idea how one of Ghidorah's brains, and the brain wasn't even in there anymore. So I guess the spirit of one of Ghidorah's brains, I hope it was the middle one that was the smartest, probably was. I don't understand how it was able to take over operations for Mechagodzilla. Because it was, I guess it became spiritual. Some of you were like, hey, Ghidorah is an alien, Grace, all right? I don't think it was ever well enough established. But if he was, I guess that maybe makes sense for it, right? I don't know if all three heads are male. I don't know what's going on there. I didn't think we know enough about Ghidorah. And I thought, I agreed that his lit up skull looked a lot like a DJ booth, which also I thought took away from some of its seriousness. But what I also thought was weird, that when he went to fight Godzilla, he knew how to use all the gizmos and gadgets that Mechagodzilla had. He was like, time for spiral fist, time for thruster punch. And I'm like, how do you know how to work all this? You're an ancient alien with 3 heads who's never used tools before. I mean, I think that before he killed all the humans, he should have sat through a tutorial. I mean, the more I thought about it, I was like, well, I guess he's always been in the ghost in the machine, while the other, the human was using Mechagodzilla. So I guess he was taking notes, just waiting for the right time. But it just made no sense to me. They were like, Mechagodzilla's become self-aware. I mean, I would have bought that more than it being the spirit of Ghidorah, the ghost in the machine. But I guess, it draws a lot from, Asian storytelling and those elements. And on that note, it also reminded me of Pacific Rim. And, I think that Western audiences just aren't as into some of these themes. Just like I don't think Western audiences are into Godzilla as much. I saw someone talk about the fact that it was hard for the West to tell a story about Godzilla because Godzilla is really a cautionary tale about the creation of nuclear weapons and nuclear proliferation, which sounds really interesting. I've never seen that in a Godzilla movie, but to be fair, I haven't watched the originals. I would like to see it. But then they said, but then this person noted that the West was the ones who were doing all the nuclear proliferation, so they would never understand that commentary. And I thought that was neat. But when it comes to like the science fiction-y elements and stuff like that, I think there are things that Western audiences just aren't as into as much. I'm not into the idea of mind controlling a giant robot. I know that's really big in Asian countries, but I don't think Western audiences have ever really taken to that, which is evidenced by the failure of Pacific Rim as well. I think, it just to me seems too removed, not engaged enough. And so I think that there's a bit of a cultural barrier there. And maybe that's why these movies don't do quite. I don't think we're that into kaiju movies either. I think we like them when they were the most like a ride. So I think that they did a good job bringing that element into this. And so like the Jurassic Park stuff that we're going to talk about, I think those are the things that are meant to appeal to Western audiences. As Disney itself has found out, it's very hard to make a movie that appeals to the entire globe. Sometimes you luck out and it does, but it's hard to make one that's engineered to appeal to everybody. I think sometimes they feel like they feel like a little bit designed by committee, which is one of my criticisms actually of this film. But, again, I wonder, would this movie have done as well if it weren't the big pandemic savior movie? I don't know. I don't think it would have. I think it would have been more like Godzilla King of Monsters and stuff like that. I think that's where it would have more likely been. But again, it's just really benefiting from just everybody needs a party right now, and this is the party. Then also, as I said, it really struck me how alone both Godzilla and Kong were in this film. I felt very bad for them. I wish that Kong had found lost family members in the center of the earth. When that little girl said, your family might be down there, I was like, oh, maybe they are. That would be a great surprise. But of course they weren't. I don't know. I mean, it might be a little ridiculous for him to be hanging out with other Kongs, but at the same time, as I said, this movie took on a very humanoid approach to these characters. So why can't he have a family? I would love it, or at least one other person. I just felt really bad for him. And as I said, I think Godzilla really needs some human friends. I mean, he kind of had some a little bit with Millie Bobby Brown and stuff, but they didn't go anywhere with that. I mean, they were just both so alone. That's another reason they should maybe try to be friends, but there's no getting over that foot thing. Now, also, speaking of human friends, how do you introduce that Kong has learned sign language and then have him hardly say anything? I was like, he's going to say more than just home, right? And they were like, nope, I think he said home and family or something like that. And I was like, he's clearly thinking a lot. I can see that when we look into his giant CGI eyes, which are really well animated to the fact that, I feel I can see him thinking. So now that he can speak, why don't we hear some of that? I would have loved for him to, and he doesn't have to have like a monologue, but I would have liked to have a little more interaction with the humans once he learned to speak. When he went down to Hollow Earth, he should have been like, you were full of crap, there's nobody down here. Or because he found some of his heritage, I guess maybe he could have been like, oh, well, thank you, at least I have this. It's just weird. If they could talk, why didn't they talk a little bit more? I just felt really let down by it. I was like, I just talk about introducing something and then letting it drop. Also, speaking of Hollow Earth, I think that everyone needs to stop digging in the earth so much. Not only is it freaking hollow, but Apex has been digging these global tunnels all over the place that we learn. So I'm like, at this point, what's holding the earth together? It's like Swiss cheese in there. I was very nervous. I was like, and then there are titans stomping around on top of it. This whole thing's gonna crumble. One of you also said in the comments of my non-spoiler review that because of all the destruction, what human would want to be on Earth still at this point? And I think there was a lot of evidence for trying to get off planet, quite frankly. Then also, how can anyone have any insurance in a world where there are titans? I mean, why? I think there should be no shiny new buildings. Everything should just be varying stages of ruin. Because who would build anything new? I mean, I guess for years they had these titans under control. They said Godzilla had gone, underwater, and Kong was in Hunger Games, as we'll talk about. So I guess but they had titan shelters built, and they had titan warning signs. I mean, I just think that insurance premiums would be just astronomically high. Like no one could afford them pretty much, except for like a few things. And that could be an interesting commentary too. I mean, the destruction in Hong Kong with their fight, they weren't even trying to be careful. Like I think at one point one of them grabbed the other one's face and like rammed it across the front of a building, which was hilarious and horrifying. I was like, I think there might be people in there. Like this is insane. Like it was like the Superman fight in Man of Steel versus Zod, which also I guess was very realistic. But hey, when Superman's like, I better take this fight away from the city, you see what he's talking about. I mean, it was just like, Hong Kong was destroyed. You just watched it and you were like, well, that's the end of Hong Kong. Oh well. All right, so my favorite thing in Godzilla versus Kong by far was Apex Cybernetics. This was basically Jurassic Park meets Skynet. And you know how I love business. I loved everything about those sequences. Although it sure pushed Monarch out of the story. I'm like, hey, wasn't Monarch a thing? And they're like, shh, don't talk about it. I mean, it was weird that Monarch wasn't anywhere. I think that this one actor, he's credited as the head of Monarch, but he had one scene and one line, and I had no idea that's who he was playing. I really liked Apex's slogan, we're not going anywhere, and neither are you. It was like a supervillain threat, but it was their company's slogan. It was really fantastic. And I loved Demian Bashir. I loved it. I loved that this was an international company with, not an American CEO. I loved the way he handled himself. I thought he just did a great job. He looked cool. He really did a fabulous job with the role. I loved when he said to Alexander Skarsgård, hey, I love crazy ideas. They made me very rich. I mean, he was just great. I loved that stuff. And I really liked the Alexander Skarsgård introductory scene. I thought that was great. It was kind of like a modern Indiana Jones situation. I liked it. But then Alexander Skarsgård's character just went all downhill from there. It was just really bad. But that showed promise. Then I like those shipping containers, although I couldn't believe there were no seatbelts in there. I'm like, isn't this going hyper fast? How are you like not squished jelly when this thing lands in Hong Kong? But it was a cool idea. I liked that the company had built that kind of a delivery system. In your face, FedEx. Although, why didn't they try? I guess because they weren't. How did the U.S. government not realize there were all these tunnels in the earth? Or Monarch. It was crazy that went undetected. Or maybe the government was in on it. But anyway, I did like Brian Tyree Henry's conspiracy theories. But that was still a cool sequence. I liked that. As for Brian Tyree Henry, I really liked his character. He was my second favorite after Kaylee Huddle, my second favorite human. I loved all of his scenes. I thought he brought a lot of energy. I thought that he was so hyper-focused that it allowed me to be more focused in following what he was saying, even though sometimes his theories weren't quite as focused as he was. But I just thought he was a great character. And I thought that he had the most motivation. He had the personal motivation from the loss of his wife. I was like, did a Titan kill her? And they never told us for sure. But also he was trying to find this mystery. He's trying to uncover a mystery. He had direction. His character, his storyline had purpose. And so I thought that was really great. Whereas a lot of the other humans were just like paper doll figures being like, where's a human? It's too expensive to have the Titans on screen the whole time. So here I am. And we're like, get off the screen. I paid to see Titans. So anyway, the only problem with Brian Tyree Henry, though, was that he made Millie Bobby Brown and Julian Dennison's characters totally unnecessary. And Millie Bobby Brown was there first. I don't think they needed Julian Dennison. Like, why was he there? I mean, he was funny at points, but Millie Bobby Brown could have just teamed up with Brian Tyree Henry. She drove herself. She could have commandeered a vehicle herself, and that would have been fine. It was too many characters. I mean, really, you could go with the script of the red pen, and you'd be like, if they're not here to die, they don't need to be here. And, because you're taking away valuable time from the humans that we do care about. And don't even get me started on Kyle Chandler. He's probably like, why was I even in this movie? I mean, I guess he gets checks, if you're in a movie, because of Screen Actors Guild, he will get checks off of Godzilla versus Kong for like years, and they're probably going to be pretty sizable considering how successful this movie is. It's like when Paul Bettany was like, if only I'd been in the end credits scene for Avengers Endgame. The checks. So I guess Kyle Chandler's like, all right, I'll run through 2 scenes. But it was crazy how much they downgraded his character. And then, while I liked Apex Cybernetics the most, what I thought was the worst was Kong's habitat, which again, as I said, was basically Hunger Games. Like when he skewered it with a tree, it was cool when he did that though. When he made a tree spear, I was like, that's pretty neat. You're pretty good at that, Kong. You got a system down. But I was like, it's exactly Hunger Games. Like if it was the same VFX files, I wouldn't be surprised. I was surprised though when it happened. I was like, oh, this isn't a real place? This is ridiculously expensive. But anyway, I did like the sequence where he woke up and like took a shower and stuff. Although I thought it wasn't great that they had like a date song and then he was going to meet this little girl. I was like, choose a less kind of romantic song for that, please. Now, Kaylee Huddle, though, she was my favorite human. I thought she was absolutely adorable. Absolutely loved her. I thought she radiated a warmth to her. But one thing that bothered me about her character was that I don't understand why she continued to wear her tribe's outfit, even when she was outside the dome and was now living with a different culture. I would think that it would be a mix. I would think that she would be introduced to childlike things, Warner Brothers has a lot of IP. Maybe she's into Looney Tunes or something, or into DC characters. I just think that, she would have something that would show that she was kind of had one foot in both worlds. To this, it almost seemed like she was in costume when she went in to see Kong, which I guess would kind of make sense. But why would she continue to wear that when she left the habitat if it was a costume? I felt like someone should take her away from Rebecca Hall, like Child Services should take her away from Rebecca Hall and be like, just to check, what do you want to wear? I mean, I don't know. I'd be curious to how other people felt about it. But it just, something about it seemed like she was really being used. And I guess in many ways her character was being used, Kaylee Huddle's, but it just was like all the bad stuff from Pocahontas, and I guess maybe, I don't know. It's interesting everybody uses Pocahontas. James Cameron did for Avatar, but everybody doesn't, I guess both of them have tried to address the bad story parts of Pocahontas, which Disney totally ignored, which has been like a shadow over that movie. But nobody's done the full Pocahontas, which was like a really bad, horrible story. Then as for Rebecca Hall's character, she was supposed to be a Jane Goodall for King Kong, which was a good idea, But this was a Jane Goodall who was a horrible failure and had accomplished absolutely nothing. She accidentally taught Kong how to do sign language and had no idea she'd succeeded. She was like the Christopher Columbus. You know, what Christopher Columbus was to exploration, she was to King Kong in terms of, you know, taking care of humans, Kong studies. Then as for Hollow Earth sequences, aka Screensaver Land. I mean, I like the gold suits. That was cool. And I thought the vehicles were also neat. That to me felt a little bit like a ride. Although Isaac Gonzalez's character, as I said in my non-spoiler review, was just way too mean. Like, not only was she, like, people can be mean, but she was like shoot yourself in the foot mean, where it's like everyone can see you coming a mile away. Like she had no finesse. She was clomping around more than Godzilla and Kong in terms of her attitude. And it was just, I don't know why anybody was putting up with it, quite frankly. I guess because she had the keys, literally, to those cars. But, I mean, way to make no one feel bad when she died. But I did feel bad, again, as I said, that there were no other Kongs down there. There were just bones, and it was so sad to see him sit on that throne by himself. I was like, you can't stay down here and just sit on this chair. You know, if they had said to him, hey, why don't you go down that tunnel? There might be a place there might be a King Kong-sized chair down there. He would have been like, hard pass. So I felt there wasn't enough down there to make it worth his while. And then Godzilla blew down the atomic breath down to the earth to get him. And like, what did that do to the earth? Speaking of putting too many holes in the earth, I was like, oh my God, I don't think the earth could take this many holes. So the whole sequence, the entire sequence made no sense to me, and I didn't think was particularly compelling. Although I did like the fight with those two monsters. But when Kong drank that monster's blood, that green blood, I'm never going to look at it the same way again. I mean, there was water down there. That was really bad. I was like, whoa. It's like when you get a cute pet and then they do something that reminds you that they are an animal and you're like, okay, all right, oh well. But I did like that fight. I liked when that thing tried to suffocate him with its wing, but then the humans had to save him again. So in fact, I believe there was not a single fight in this movie where Kong didn't need an assist. So Godzilla could have just burned him with his words instead of stomping on his chest. He'd be like, you constantly need help. That'd be funny if there was like a mic drop contest instead between the two of them. Then, I guess, why was Godzilla so upset? I think it was because he could sense they were building Mechagodzilla, but that skull, Ghidorah, which is probably what he would have sensed, was in Hong Kong, not in Florida. I didn't remember seeing an addition. I mean, there were 3 skulls, I guess, but I didn't see one in Florida. Did you see one in Florida? It was like a metal thing that was exposed when Brian Tyree Henry saw that downstairs. I like -33. That was pretty funny. So I don't understand why he was inspired to attack, why Godzilla was inspired to attack Florida, where he killed a lot of people. Again, how can you root for a monster that is just, has such disregard for human life? I did like during that sequence, though, or right after it, that they had CNN cover it, because usually it's like a fake version of CNN. They're like GNN, Global News Network, but here they were like, we own CNN, let's just use it. And I thought that was really weird. They should get the guy who does the funny lower thirds. They should have utilized him for that, but I don't believe that they did. So I feel that even though I enjoy the perspective of what it's like for humans to live in a Titan world, because it kind of gives you a feeling what it would be like for you. It also feels a little bit like a ride. It reminds me of that great San Diego Comic-Con experience I always bring up to you, where they had us be in an office building and we saw Godzilla through the office window. I would have loved even more of that. But I also I would have liked to have more time from Godzilla and Kong's perspectives, because again, they made them so human. I would have liked to have followed them around more. I think I didn't really want to have any of these human characters. I would have preferred just a mix of being from Godzilla and Kong's perspectives, and then from the perspectives of, people on the ground. And you don't need to establish these long storylines from them. You can just pick, as soon as you see someone, you can relate to them, and you can just give some visual cues, like, oh, it's a soldier, it's a family, it's a scientist, it's tourists. And then I think that would be fun. I think that you had you had the emotional hook was Godzilla and Kong to me. So you didn't need all these other little tiny emotional hooks, quite frankly. But what did you think? What did you think? Share your thoughts down below. And again, I want to hear about your viewing experiences and, how you feel about this movie, not just from how it is on its own, but from the perspective of the pandemic, and if that's affecting you and how. All right, share those thoughts down below, subscribe today, and of course, as always, you can check out some more videos right now.